This video is sponsored by Ridge. Ridge sells products like backpacks, power banks, and have over a dozen different wallet designs to choose from. The Ridge wallet has over 30,000 5-star reviews, a minimal design to streamline what you carry every day, as well as a lifetime warranty. Get 10% off your order today with free worldwide shipping and returns by going to ridge.com/anus, yes, that's correct, and use code ANUS to get 10% off with free shipping and returns. Link is in the description. Hey everyone, my name's Tomato Anus, also known as the voice trying to tell you that you're in a coma, and this is a 6% speedrun of Fallout 4. Now, it's likely that you've already seen this run in my Fallout Anthology 6% run. However, that run was about 11 months ago, and a lot has changed since then in Fallout 4. A lot is still the same though. We still limit our frame rate to 60 FPS to make sure that the speed of the physics are the same for everyone running. We still play in German since it has the fastest dialogue in the intro of the game. We still play on very easy to mitigate damage, which actually is a huge part of the run now. We still don't count loading screens into our final time. We still cycle through our characters in a certain pattern to time out where Codsworth will be to save a second. We still walk around in the pre-war house just interacting with everything to get through it as quickly as possible. We still max out charisma and agility while dumping the rest into endurance because we need to be smooth as butter to sleep with our partner later on, and also maxing agility over endurance is more effective in regards to allowing us to sprint in this scenario. And the goal of the run is still to sleep with someone as fast as possible. A lot is still the same. I mean, I guess I could have just said that from the get-go and not necessarily listed a bunch of individual things, but I got carried away. I apologize for that. Let's move on to the things that are different. Now, there are really just two big things that are different, but they're big enough to warrant this new video on the category. To explain one of them, I'm going to need a visual aid, so why not just use a visual aid for both? Seeing as the beginning of the run is pretty stale with just walking around the house, let's move the gameplay somewhere out of the way for the time being. The first glitch that needs some explaining is definitely the more simple of the two. The community hasn't really decided on an official name for it, but we mostly refer to it as the elevator clip into the vault. In Fallout 4, you enter Vault 111 via a large elevator platform that slowly lowers you downwards. It was originally discovered that if you spam both escape and quick save, that you'll slowly clip through the platform as it's moving down. If you do it fast enough, you'll fully clip through the elevator and fall downwards. It turns out though that quick saving is entirely unnecessary to perform this glitch. All you have to do is press escape fast enough. Quick saving was only used at first because spamming it lags the game a little bit, allowing for you to enter more escape inputs in a shorter span of time in the game. Instead, just pressing escape fast enough does the trick, and is slightly faster than pressing quick save as well. You have to really spam escape though, to the point where it's easier to just bind your scroll wheel to the escape button. This can be used in two spots. As soon as the elevator begins lowering for the first time after the nuke goes off, and also once you actually load inside the vault. For the first scenario, if you're able to drop through the platform in time before the platform reaches the loading zone, you'll fall down into the loading zone yourself and move the game onto the next section where you're on the elevator inside of the vault. Overall, this is skipping a relatively short elevator ride, and if done well, would only save 1 to 2 seconds. Most members of the community, including myself, have decided that it's not worth to go for because the time save is too small to justify the mental strain that is caused from having to reset a ton for messing up your escape spamming. The second scenario that I mentioned earlier, the one inside the vault, is a bit more beneficial to perform. Normally, when you ride the elevator to the bottom, there's a metal grate that serves as an elevator door and you have to wait for it to open before progressing. However, if you spam escape to drop down the elevator shaft early enough, the collision on the grating isn't loaded and you can just walk right through it, skipping both the elevator ride down and also skipping having to wait for the grating to open. Overall, this saves roughly 15 to 18 seconds. The only issue with this is that the elevator shaft is pretty tall, so you take some fall damage from clipping through the platform. In fact, if you perform the clip too early, you'll take too much fall damage and either die or break your leg, causing you to move slowly. Both of these end the run. If you perform the clip too late, then you won't be able to make it to the grating in time before the collision loads, and you'll have to wait for the platform to catch up and sit through things as normal. The timing that I employ in my runs is to begin my spamming about half a second after my HUD reappears in the game. We're arriving at this part in the run, so let's see how it played out. This worked out almost perfectly. Ideally, you want to drop from as high as possible without breaking your leg or dying, since that means you skip more of the elevator ride. The fact that you can hear my character's heartbeat and that I have the woozy screen effect means that I'm close to death, meaning that I felt almost the maximum amount of height possible without dying. The only issue with this in sex percent is that it increases our likelihood of dying later on, since we typically have to run past a lot of enemies. I have a slight workaround for that, but we'll get to that later. For now, we have some other things to explain. First is punch warping. I've explained punch warping a lot in older videos of mine, so I'll keep this brief. If you try to melee attack something in VATS, but your movement is obstructed, then you can cancel your attack and store the coordinates of where you were standing. The next time you use VATS, if you use a melee attack, you get teleported back to those coordinates as they correspond to the coordinate grid in your current cell. If you don't know what a cell is, don't worry, I'll explain that in a second as well. Another thing to go over quickly is item climbing. Again, I've explained this ad nauseum, but keeping it brief, if you hold an object under you, you can climb up walls and shit. When we use a cone, we call it VLC clipping. We use this to skip most of the vault. The big thing to explain is COC2. COC stands for Center on Cell and refers to what happens when you fall out of bounds. First though, for those unaware, what is a cell? Cell is the technical term in the game's engine for a location. Cells are usually self-contained. Vault 111 itself is a full cell. The insides of buildings that you have to load into are cells. The wasteland itself is a cell, although that's a bit more nuanced since it's made up of a ton of smaller cells that load in chunks, but that's a lesson for another day. Back to COC or Center on Cell. If you happen to fall out of bounds, it would be pretty dumb if you fell forever, so COC is implemented so that you eventually hit an invisible plane, and once you hit that plane, you're transported back to solid ground in a preset COC location. Each cell has its own COC location, and some have multiple, but if you fall out of bounds, you'll eventually hit the invisible plane and get warped back. Alternatively, if you fall underneath this cell and are directly underneath normal ground, you'll get warped directly upwards to the ground when you hit the COC plane. This is referred to as an upwarp. You only get sent to the COC location upon hitting the plane if there's no ground directly above you. The COC plane does have a finite edge to it though, meaning that you can fall beyond its extents. If you do this, there's luckily a second COC plane much further down that some people believe may just be the cell floor, and we refer to it as COC2. Hitting this plane behaves the same as a normal COC plane, with a notable exception that was discovered. If you fall beneath the elevator in Vault 111, when you hit the COC plane, you get warped back to the COC location outside of the cryopod. However, if you hit the COC2 plane beneath the elevator, you get upwarped to the top of the elevator shaft, which places you in the loading zone to exit the vault, immediately bringing you outside. This skips having to ride the elevator and saves around 30 to 40 seconds. In a moment, we'll gain control of our character and employ all the things I just talked about. The first thing we're going to do is grab the security baton, which allows for us to use VATS. If we don't grab it, then we wouldn't be able to use VATS with the current route we take through the vault. With the baton in our possession, we grab a nearby cone and perform the first of 2 VLC clips. Unfortunately, cones can't phase through walls, so we have to grab a new one and then set up our punch warp on some rad roaches to store our coordinates. We then perform our second VLC clip, which lets us dance on the ceiling like Lionel Richie. We then run and jump out of bounds past the COC plane, where we turn around and fall back under the elevator and quick save quick load. Quick saving and quick loading skips having to fall the full way and causes for us to hit the next COC plane below us, making us hit the COC2 plane and immediately upwarp into the load zone. Once we finish loading, we'll be outside riding the elevator up to the surface. The physics-defying feats don't stop here though, because we still have a punch warp to trigger. Upon gaining control, we're going to carefully run down the hill, making sure we don't take any fall damage to further reduce our already depleted health bar. We then run up to one of the nearby houses in Sanctuary and melee attack a Radroach in VATS, which triggers our punch warp, warping us to the coordinates we had stored. In the wasteland, the coordinates that we stored correspond to nearby green tech genetics, which is in the center of the map. However, the Z coordinate we stored put us under the map, but we're able to upwarp back onto solid ground by just falling for a bit in the void. When we arrive back to the earthly plane, we have to try and make it to Goodneighbor, where our sleeping partner awaits. Normally, the fastest running route to get to Goodneighbor is to run through a nearby raider encampment, run across a super long bridge, and run through a door that's guarded by a raider and their pet doggo. This route has a high likelihood of taking damage, and if you don't remember, we're so messed up from the drop when we entered the elevator that even 200 years later, we can hear our heart beating in our head, which, I'm not a doctor, but that definitely does not seem healthy. Instead of the risky running route, we took the little puss route of swimming through the Charles River, which loses us about a second, but guarantees we take very little damage. On land, we catch a glimpse of the dog I mentioned earlier in the corner of our eye and have a panic attack and start sprinting towards Goodneighbor. As we sprint down the road, I make like Alan Arkin in Serpentine to avoid getting shot and also mash E while I do so. This is because the first time your health drops below a certain threshold in your playthrough, you get a pop-up telling you your health is low. I spammed E in anticipation of getting hit, only to stop spamming and get hit unexpectedly right afterwards. I enter Goodneighbor via a back alley that I still am unsure of whether or not it's intentional, and as I enter the loading zone, I made sure to stop sprinting. Because I'm not sprinting when I enter the load zone, when I finish loading, my AP bar will be fully replenished, allowing me to sprint again. We then can run on over to the third rail, where our horizontal dance partner is putting on a show. In order to speak with Magnolia, we need her to finish her song. Luckily, we can force her to stop by attacking a patron, which angers everyone inside. By putting away our baton though, they all forgive us and we can speak to Magnolia and hopefully strike her fancy. Magnolia will sometimes reject your advances, showing that even being a quantum anomaly sometimes won't be enough for some people. Fortunately for us, Magnolia seemed to like our general demeanor and agrees to spend a night alone with us. The run officially ends after the screen fades to black. Because this ended up being a world record, we had to continue on with tradition and challenge Magnolia to a battle to the death after our coital engagement. If you made it to the end of the run, I'd like to say thank you, and also would like to specifically say thank you to those of you who choose to support the channel on Patreon. If you want to support and you're also interested in development updates on videos, early access to sponsor-free versions of videos, and also the occasional Patreon exclusive Fanfiction Friday video, head on over there and drop as little as $1 a month. It's entirely unnecessary, but I truly do appreciate those of you who choose to support anyways. Also, if you have any video recommendations or feedback, hop into my Discord where we have channels for specifically those things. Link is in the description. That's all for this video though. This was a 6% speedrun of Fallout 4. I've been Tomato Anus, and I hope you have an above average day.